I'm Sarah Bennett, 34, the forgotten daughter of billionaire tech mogul Margaret Bennett. While my glamorous sister Eliza soaked up the spotlight and our mother's love, I built a life far from their world of wealth and power. When I returned, home for Mom's final days after years of estrangement, I never expected to find Eliza already celebrating her massive inheritance, while our mother still clung to life upstairs. All I received was an old phone, while my sister got $700 million. Before I tell you what I found when I turned on Mom's phone, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever felt overlooked by family. The modest one-bedroom apartment I rent in Portland bears no resemblance to the 30-room mansion where I grew up. My life as a high school art teacher couldn't be further removed from the Bennett family legacy. My students have no idea Ms. Bennett is technically an heiress to one of America's largest tech fortunes. Or at least I was, until recently. The pattern of favoritism toward my sister Eliza started early. I can still picture our 6th birthday party, the last one we celebrated together. Though we're twins, we couldn't be more different. Eliza received a custom-made junior business suit matching Mom's executive wear, along with a toy laptop preloaded with simplified versions of the Bennett tech software. I got art supplies that were promptly relegated to the playroom, with Mom making it clear they were not to make a mess in the main house. "Business is in Eliza's blood," Mom would say proudly, while giving me the kind of look that suggested I was somehow defective for preferring creativity over capitalism. Margaret Bennett built Bennett Tech from nothing but a borrowed laptop and sheer determination. The company pioneered security software that eventually became standard in every major corporation worldwide. By the time I was 10, Mom was worth over $1 billion and had a reputation for ruthlessness that struck fear into competitors. Never show weakness was her personal mantra, repeated so often it might as well have been embroidered on our family crest. Dad wasn't around to balance Mom's intensity. James Bennett died of a sudden heart attack when Eliza and I were just 4, leaving Mom to raise us alone while running her growing empire. The only photos of him showed a kind-faced man with my same hazel eyes and artistic temperament. Mom rarely spoke of him, but our housekeeper once told me he'd been the heart to balance your mother's ambition. As we grew, the divide between Eliza and me only widened. She thrived under Mom's mentorship, absorbing every lesson in corporate strategy and competitive tactics. I retreated into art, finding solace in creating beauty rather than business plans. By high school, Eliza was interning at Bennett Tech headquarters, while I was winning regional art competitions that Mom never attended. "Art is a hobby, Sarah. Not a career," she'd lecture whenever my achievements were mentioned. The Bennett name stands for innovation and industry, not finger painting. The summer after college graduation marked the final fracture in our family. I'd earned a spot in a prestigious art program in Europe, while Eliza was preparing to join Bennett Tech officially as a junior executive. Mom had arranged a position for me, too, in the company's insignificant marketing department. "You're a Bennett," she said, sliding the job offer across the dinner table. "It's time you started acting like one." "I am acting like one," I replied. "I'm pursuing excellence in my field, just like you did." "Drawing pictures isn't a field, Sarah. It's a distraction." The argument escalated until I finally said what I'd been holding back for years. "Maybe I don't want your kind of success if it means becoming someone like you." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's face hardened into the same expression she wore when crushing competitors. "Then perhaps you don't want to be a Bennett at all." I left that night, taking only what fit in my car. For the next 12 years, I built my own life. I earned my teaching credentials, found an apartment in Portland, and created a community among fellow artists and educators. My contact with family became limited to obligatory birthday texts and the occasional stilted holiday call. The last significant conversation I had with Mom occurred 3 years ago. She'd called unexpectedly after seeing my name mentioned in an article about an arts education initiative I'd started for underprivileged kids. "You could be running Bennett Tech's entire charitable foundation instead of scraping together grants for finger painting classes," she said without even a hello. Such wasted potential. I hung up and didn't speak to her again until the call came about her terminal cancer diagnosis. Eliza's voice had been characteristically efficient. Mother's been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Prognosis is 2 months, possibly less. She's asking for family to gather. The unspoken message was clear. Despite everything, I was still being counted as family. At least technically. Despite the years of hurt, I requested emergency leave from my school and packed a bag. Whatever our differences, I couldn't let my mother die without saying goodbye. The drive up to the Bennett estate felt surreal. The wrought iron gates still bore the stylized B I'd sketched as a teenager, one of the few contributions of mine that had ever been implemented in family matters. The security guard, a new hire, who didn't recognize me, checked his list twice before reluctantly calling the main house for confirmation. "Ms. Bennett is expecting you," he finally said, though his tone suggested I was anything but welcome. The mansion had been updated since my departure, now sleeker and even more impersonal than before. Where there had once been a few family photos, corporate awards now dominated. It was as if the building itself had been scrubbed of any evidence that a family, not just a business entity, lived there. Eliza met me in the foyer, perfect as always, in a tailored black dress that managed to look both funeral-appropriate and fashion-forward. At 34, my twin had the polished gleam of old money, though our wealth was barely a generation old. "Sarah, you made it." She air-kissed somewhere near my cheek, careful not to actually make contact. "Mother's resting. Dr. Farrell says the medication makes her drift in and out of lucidity, so don't expect much. No embrace, no, 'I've missed you.' Not even a 'thanks for coming.' Just clinical information delivered like a quarterly report." "When can I see her?" I asked, dropping my worn duffel bag on the pristine marble floor. "Dinner is at 7. You can see her after. Monica will show you to your room." She glanced at her sleek watch. "I have a board call in 10 minutes. Mother's condition hasn't stopped business from continuing." Monica, apparently the new housekeeper, led me through the mansion to what had once been my bedroom. Opening the door revealed a space I barely recognized. My murals had been painted over, replaced with bland beige walls adorned with generic modern art prints. The room had been converted into a guest suite with no trace of the teenager who once lived there. "How long has it been like this?" I asked Monica. "Since before my time, and I've been here 5 years," she replied, setting down my bag. "Most of the house has been redone." Dinner was an awkward affair, with just Eliza and me at opposite ends of the massive dining table. Mother's place remained symbolically empty, though I doubted she'd been joining Eliza for meals even before her illness. The company's stock price has actually increased since Mother's diagnosis went public, Eliza remarked between bites of perfectly seared salmon. "Investors have confidence in the succession plan." "Is that really what you want to discuss right now?" I pushed away my barely touched plate. "Our mother is dying upstairs. And life continues, Sarah. That's business." She took a deliberate sip of wine. "Something you never understood." As the meal concluded, I overheard 2 staff members whispering near the kitchen entrance. "Ms. Eliza's already got decorators planning the new executive office." "Measurements taken yesterday," one murmured. "And the celebration dinner for the inheritance announcement is already booked at the Pinnacle," the other replied. $700 million is worth celebrating, I suppose. My stomach twisted. Eliza was already planning her post-mother future while Mom still breathed upstairs. After dinner, I was finally permitted to see Mom. The master suite had been transformed into a sterile medical setting, with monitors, IV stands, and a hospital bed replacing the grand furniture I remembered. In the center of it all, a diminished figure barely made an impression under the blankets. Margaret Bennett, once the most intimidating presence in any room, now looked small and fragile. Her signature black hair had thinned, and without her usual immaculate makeup, I could see every line etched by decades of hard decisions and harder ambition. "Mom?" I approached cautiously, unsure if she was awake. Her eyes fluttered open, momentarily unfocused before settling on me. "Sarah?" Her voice was a whisper. "You came." "Of course I came." I took her hand, shocked at how cold and papery her skin felt. "Tried to call you. Before." Her words slurred slightly, and her gaze drifted. "You should let her rest now." A voice interrupted. A man in an expensive suit stepped from the shadows of the room. "I'm Vincent Mercer, your mother's new attorney. She needs her strength." Before I could object, a private nurse appeared and adjusted Mom's IV, causing her to drift almost immediately back to sleep. "We have a schedule for visitors," the nurse informed me briskly. "Ms. Eliza has approved 1 hour after breakfast tomorrow." I left feeling more like an intruder than a daughter. In the hallway, I encountered an older woman who I recognized as Agnes, the housekeeper who had been with us since childhood. "Miss Sarah," she whispered, quickly looking around to ensure we were alone. "Your mother's been asking for you, for weeks before you arrived, always when she's clearest, before the heavy medications." Eliza told me she only asked for family to come recently, when the prognosis worsened. Agnes shook her head slightly. "That's not true. She's been asking specifically for you since the diagnosis 3 months ago." 3 months? Not the 2 months Eliza had mentioned. Something wasn't adding up. The next morning, I attempted to see Mom during my approved hour, only to be told by the nurse that she was with her lawyer reviewing urgent documents and couldn't be disturbed. When I tried again in the afternoon, Eliza intercepted me in the hallway. "Mother's meeting with the Bennett Tech CFO. Critical company transitions can't wait on sentiment, Sarah." My frustration growing, I decided to explore the mansion, hoping to find some connection to the home it had once been. In the library, I encountered Vincent Mercer again, this time examining family photos on the wall. "Ah, Sarah," he said, turning, with practiced smoothness. "I was just admiring these old pictures. Your mother speaks of you, you know." "Does she?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "Indeed. She's quite interested in your artistic endeavors." The pause before artistic made it sound like a questionable life choice. "Tell me, have you and your mother discussed the estate planning?" "At all." The question seemed inappropriate coming from him rather than Eliza or Mom herself. "No, we haven't." Interesting." He made a note in his phone. "Very interesting." That night, I tried yet again to see Mom, sneaking up after dinner while Eliza was on a call. The nurse was just leaving the room. "She's been sedated for the night," the woman informed me, blocking the doorway. "Doctor's orders. Ms. Eliza was very specific about not disturbing her rest." "I just want to sit with her," I pleaded. The nurse hesitated, then glanced at her watch. "I'm due for a break. I'll be gone 15 minutes. What happens in that time isn't my concern." She stepped aside, giving me a look that held something like pity. Inside, Mom was indeed sleeping, but not peacefully. Her brow was furrowed and her breathing seemed labored. I sat beside her and gently took her hand. "I'm here, Mom," I whispered. "I don't know if you wanted me here or if Eliza's just keeping up appearances, but I came." To my surprise, her fingers tightened slightly around mine, and her eyes opened a crack. "Sarah," she murmured, her voice alarmingly weak. "My phone. Need you to—" Before she could finish, the door opened and Eliza entered, her expression hardening when she saw me. "What are you doing? She's supposed to be resting." "I'm just sitting with our dying mother, Eliza. Is that allowed?" "Not if it disrupts her medication schedule." She moved to the IV stand, checking the levels of whatever was flowing into Mom's veins. "You always did think the rules didn't apply to you." I left, but not before noticing how quickly Mom had drifted back into unconsciousness after Eliza adjusted something on the IV line. The pattern continued for days. Every attempt I made to spend time with Mom was blocked, delayed, or interrupted. Meanwhile, I discovered Eliza showing potential buyers around certain parts of the house when she thought I was out walking the grounds. The guest wing could easily be converted to a separate residence, I overheard her telling a couple in expensive casual wear. Mother always planned to modernize this section anyway. She was selling off parts of the estate before Mom was even gone. By the end of my first week back home, the evidence of Eliza's premature inheritance celebration was becoming impossible to ignore. Late one evening, I found a catering proposal left carelessly on the kitchen counter, detailing plans for an estate transition celebration at the Pinnacle, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. The projected guest count was 80, mainly Bennett Tech executives and board members, with a proposed date just 2 weeks away. Mom's doctors had given her at least a month to live. The medication situation continued to trouble me as well. Mom seemed most lucid in the mornings, before what the nurse called her pain management regimen began. Yet these were precisely the hours when Eliza and Vincent Mercer most aggressively scheduled meetings in her room. During one rare moment when I was permitted to see Mom alone, she seemed almost like her old self, sharp and perceptive. "They keep me foggy," she said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it yet. "Watch the pills." Before I could ask what she meant, the nurse returned with the morning medication tray. Mom's demeanor changed instantly, becoming compliant and distant. Within minutes of taking the pills, her eyes glazed over, and our conversation became impossible to maintain. That afternoon, I decided to investigate further. Under the pretense of fetching a book for Mom, I slipped into her private study, a room that had been strictly off-limits during my childhood. The space was immaculate, with nothing out of place on the massive mahogany desk. The only personal touch was a small, framed photo I'd never seen before. Mom holding an art award I'd won in 10th grade. I didn't even know she'd attended that ceremony. Moving to the bookshelf, I noticed a row of leather-bound journals, each embossed with a year. Out of curiosity, I pulled the volume from 3 years ago, when we'd had our last significant conversation. Flipping through, I discovered several pages had been torn out, with just the ragged edges remaining near the binding. The missing pages corresponded to the dates around our final argument. A noise in the hallway startled me, and I quickly replaced the journal, grabbing a random novel as my cover story. I turned to find Vincent Mercer watching me from the doorway. "Curious about your mother's private thoughts?" he asked, his tone making the innocent question sound like an accusation. "Just getting a book she requested," I lied, holding up the novel. "Interesting. She specifically asked for Jane Austen? While reviewing her will?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. Margaret's literary tastes must have changed dramatically in her illness. The will? I thought that was finalized weeks ago. According to Eliza, something flickered across his face. Just some minor codicils, nothing that would interest an artist. Again, that pause that made my profession sound frivolous. As I tried to leave, he blocked my path slightly. "You know, Sarah, families like yours often find it easier when estranged members don't suddenly reappear during difficult transitions. It can complicate matters unnecessarily." The threat was thinly veiled, but I stood my ground. "I'm here because my mother is dying, Mr. Mercer. Not because of any transition." His smile tightened. "Of course. Though I wonder if you'd have come if your sister hadn't mentioned the reading of the will in her call." She hadn't. The realization must have shown on my face because his smile widened fractionally before he stepped aside to let me pass. My determination to spend time with Mom intensified after this encounter. I began setting my alarm for 5 a.m., slipping into her room before the nurse arrived with the morning medications. During these brief windows, Mom would sometimes squeeze my hand or whisper fragmented sentences that hinted at concerns about Eliza and the company. During one such early visit, I found Agnes, the longtime housekeeper, already in the room, gently helping Mom drink water. "Miss Sarah," she whispered, startled by my appearance. "You shouldn't be here now. Ms. Eliza has strict instructions." "I'm sure she does," I replied, taking a seat on Mom's other side. "But I'm not leaving." Agnes glanced nervously at the door, before leaning closer. "Your mother's not always as out of it as they want you to think." There's been talk downstairs about the medications, about Mr. Mercer's frequent visits, about documents being signed. What kind of documents? I don't know exactly, but whenever your mother has a truly lucid day, Mr. Mercer and Ms. Eliza get very anxious. Last week, she refused her afternoon medication, and within the hour, Dr. Farrell arrived to adjust her prescription to something stronger. Mom stirred, her eyes focusing on me with sudden clarity. "Sarah, the phone, in my drawer." Her voice was barely audible. "Take it." Before I could respond, the door opened, and Eliza entered with the nurse. "What's going on here?" Eliza demanded. "Mother needs rest, not a social hour." "I was just sitting with her," I replied, standing my ground. "She's our mother, Eliza, not a business asset you're managing." "You abandoned this family for 12 years, she hissed. "Don't pretend to care about her welfare now." "I left because I wasn't welcome as myself. That's different from abandonment." Eliza's eyes narrowed. "Regardless, Mother's care schedule is carefully planned. Agnes, you're supposed to be preparing the East Wing for tomorrow's board luncheon, not entertaining Sarah's sentimentality." After they ushered me out, I spent the day wandering the grounds, trying to process everything I'd learned. The pieces weren't fitting together properly. If Mom had been asking for me for months, why had Eliza waited until the last possible moment to call? Why were the journals missing pages? And what was on the phone Mom wanted me to take? That evening, I discovered just how far Eliza's preparations had advanced. Returning from a walk, I noticed unfamiliar cars in the circular driveway. Following the sound of voices, I found myself outside the mansion's rarely used ballroom. Through the partially open door, I could see Eliza in an elegant cocktail dress, champagne flute in hand, addressing about 24 people in business attire. "While we all feel the weight of Mother's situation," she was saying, "she would be the first to insist that Bennett Tech's future remains our priority. As her designated successor, I wanted to assure you all personally that the transition will be seamless." A tall man in an expensive suit raised his glass. "To Margaret Bennett's legacy, and to Eliza, who will undoubtedly take Bennett Tech to even greater heights." As glasses clinked in celebration, I felt physically ill. My mother lay dying just 2 floors above, while her favored daughter hosted what amounted to a pre-funeral corporate mixer. Unable to watch anymore, I stormed into the room. Conversations halted mid-sentence as heads turned toward me. "Sarah." Eliza's voice carried the practiced warmth she used for business functions. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us. Everyone, my sister has come home for Mother's final days." The way she emphasized final days made it sound like I'd barely made the deadline. Several guests murmured polite but awkward greetings. "I wasn't aware we were hosting events while Mom is receiving end-of-life care," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Mother specifically requested that business continue as usual," Eliza responded smoothly. "These are key board members and executives who needed reassurance about the company's stability. And the champagne? Was that her request too?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Eliza's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "Perhaps you'd prefer to remember Mother your way, and we'll remember her ours," she said, her voice honeyed, with false understanding. "After all, you chose to remove yourself from this part of her life long ago." It was a perfect checkmate move, designed to make me appear like the unreasonable one. I left without another word, but not before noting Vincent Mercer watching the exchange with calculating interest from the corner of the room. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sounds of the impromptu celebration continued downstairs long after I retreated to my room. Around midnight, I heard Eliza's voice in the hallway outside Mom's suite. "The new estate valuation came in," she was saying to someone. "With the tech patents and real estate holdings, it's just over $700 million. We'll need to accelerate the timeline for the formal announcement." A male voice that I recognized as Vincent Mercer's replied. "The documents are ready. We just need a lucid enough moment for the final signatures. Then reduce the sedation tomorrow morning." just long enough to get it done. They were talking about Mom like she was a transaction to be completed, not a dying woman. And the amount Eliza had mentioned, 700 million, matched exactly with the celebration planning I'd discovered. By the time the sun rose, I had made a decision. I needed to find out what was on Mom's phone, and I needed to do it immediately. The next morning brought a noticeable shift in the mansion's atmosphere. Medical equipment was being quietly moved into Mom's suite, and Dr. Farrell arrived before 7, looking grim. I cornered him in the hallway after he emerged from examining. "Mom! How is she really doing?" I asked, blocking his path. He hesitated, glancing nervously toward Eliza's room. "The cancer has progressed more rapidly than we anticipated. I've advised the family to prepare for the end within the next 24 to 48 hours. "The family?" I echoed. "I am the family, and this is the first I'm hearing of it. I was told Ms. Eliza would handle all family communications," he stammered. "Please excuse me." Throughout the day, a stream of people came and went. The hospital chaplain, additional nurses, and Vincent Mercer, who spent nearly 2 hours in Mom's room with Eliza and a notary. I was told repeatedly that Mom was not receiving visitors during these meetings. By evening, Agnes sought me out in the garden, her usually composed face showing distress. "Miss Sarah, I don't think your mother will last the night," she whispered. "And Ms. Eliza has instructed that no one but herself and the medical team be allowed in the room." "That's not happening," I said, my voice harder than I'd intended. "Can you create some kind of distraction in about 20 minutes? Something that might draw Eliza and the nurse away briefly?" Agnes nodded slowly. "The backup generator has been temperamental lately. A power failure in the East Wing might require immediate attention, especially with all the medical equipment." I squeezed her hand in silent thanks. True to her word, exactly. 20 minutes later, alarms began blaring from the East Wing and lights flickered dramatically. As predicted, this caused immediate concern, with Eliza and the nurse rushing to ensure the backup power system would support Mom's medical equipment. I slipped into Mom's room during the commotion. The changes in her condition shocked me. In just one day, she had deteriorated dramatically, her breathing shallow and labored. I moved to her bedside and gently took her hand. "Mom, it's Sarah. I'm here." To my surprise, her eyes fluttered open, clearer than they'd been in days. "Sarah," she whispered. "Time's almost. Need to know." "Know what, Mom?" With what seemed like tremendous effort, she reached toward the bedside drawer. "Phone. Take it now. Everything. There." Her eyes held mine with sudden intensity. "Don't trust Eliza. Or Vincent. The will. Not what I—" Her words slurred as her strength failed, but her eyes remained locked on mine, desperately trying to communicate something important. I quickly opened the drawer and found an older model smartphone, slipping it into my pocket just as the door opened behind me. "What are you doing in here?" Eliza demanded, with the nurse right behind her. "Saying goodbye to our mother," I replied, moving away from the drawer. "Something you might want to consider between board meetings." Eliza's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, the nurse gasped. "Her oxygen levels are dropping. We need Dr. Farrell immediately." The next few hours passed in a blur of medical terminology and hushed, urgent conversations. At 3:17 a.m., Margaret Bennett, titan of industry and complicated mother, took her last breath. Eliza and I were both present, though standing on opposite sides of the bed, as divided in that moment as we had been for years. In the days that followed, Eliza took complete control of the funeral arrangements. The ceremony was scheduled at the city's grandest cathedral, with a guest list that read like a who's who of the tech industry. My input was neither sought nor welcomed. "The Bennett Tech Board will attend in full," Eliza informed me as she reviewed seating charts with the event planner. "The governor has confirmed as well. Mother's impact on the industry demands nothing less." "What about her friends?" I asked. Surely she had people who knew her as more than a business connection. Eliza looked up from her tablet with genuine confusion. Her most meaningful relationships were through the company. The board members were her friends. The funeral itself was a spectacle of power and wealth, rather than a personal remembrance. Speaker after speaker extolled Margaret Bennett's business acumen, her market insights, her competitive instincts. Not one person mentioned her laugh, her secret love of cheesy action movies, or how she used to hum while reviewing quarterly reports. I sat in the front row beside Eliza, feeling like we were remembering two completely different women. The reading of the will was scheduled for the day after the funeral at Vincent Mercer's downtown office. The sleek conference room contained only Eliza, Vincent, myself, and a junior associate taking notes. Vincent began with practiced solemnity. As executor of Margaret Bennett's estate, it is my duty to communicate her final wishes. He produced a thick document bearing Mom's distinctive signature. The will was updated and finalized 3 weeks ago, with your mother of sound mind and in the presence of 2 witnesses. What followed was an elaborate distribution of assets that all boiled down to one essential fact. Eliza received everything of significance. The mansion, the majority shareholding in Bennett Tech, all investment accounts, art collections, and properties. The total value, as Vincent announced with appropriate gravitas, was approximately $712 million, pending final valuation of certain patents and intellectual property assets. Then he turned to me, his expression a carefully composed mask of professional sympathy. To Sarah Bennett, Margaret leaves her personal smartphone and the following message. Sometimes the smallest gifts contain the greatest value. Eliza couldn't quite suppress her smirk. How appropriate. Mother always did appreciate irony. The humiliation burned through me. After 12 years of estrangement, my final inheritance was a used phone and a cryptic message. The assembled lawyers watched with barely concealed curiosity as I absorbed the news. "Are there any questions?" Vincent asked, clearly eager to conclude this awkward moment. "Just one," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "When exactly did Mom sign this version of the will? I'd like to see the witness signatures." Vincent's smile tightened fractionally. "The documentation is all in order, I assure you. Your mother was quite clear about her wishes. I'd still like to see it." "Perhaps at a later date," he deflected smoothly. "Today is for processing the news, not legal minutia." Back at the hotel where I'd moved after the funeral, I sat on the edge of the bed holding Mom's phone. Despite my hurt and anger, I couldn't help wondering about her final message. Why would she deliberately leave me just this phone when she knew Eliza would use it to humiliate me one last time? The screen was dark, the battery long dead. I plugged it into my charger, half expecting it to be passcode locked or wiped clean. To my surprise, after powering up, it requested a password. I tried the obvious. Mom's birthday, the year Bennett Tech was founded, even Eliza's birthday. Nothing worked. Frustrated, I was about to give up when I remembered something from my childhood. Mom had a nickname for me that she only used when we were alone. Starlight, because of how my eyes lit up when I talked about art. On a hunch, I typed Starlight into the password field. The phone unlocked instantly. The home screen was surprisingly ordinary. Default wallpaper, standard apps arranged in no particular order. Nothing immediately suggested why Mom would consider this phone worthy of being my only inheritance. I began exploring, starting with the photo gallery. Most images were what you'd expect on a CEO's phone: screenshots of presentation slides, photos of contract pages, and business dinners. But tucked into a folder labeled Personal was something unexpected. Dozens of photos of my artwork, spanning from high school projects to recent exhibitions I'd never told her about. She'd been following my artistic career all along, secretly collecting images of my work. The text messages contained nothing revelatory, mostly brief exchanges with Eliza and various executives. The email app was logged out, requiring additional credentials I didn't have. Growing increasingly puzzled, I noticed an app I didn't recognize: with a simple icon labeled VM. Opening it revealed a voice memo application with hundreds of recordings spanning the past 5 years, meticulously organized into folders by date and subject. The first recording I played was labeled Board Meeting June 2023. Mom's voice came through clearly. This recording is the property of Margaret Bennett, made for personal record-keeping pursuant to Section 8.3 of the Bennett Tech Bylaws, which I personally wrote. I scrolled through the folders, finding recordings of every imaginable business interaction, negotiations, performance reviews, strategy sessions. Mom had apparently been documenting everything. Then I noticed a folder simply titled ENV with recordings from just the past 4 months, corresponding with the timeline of Mom's illness. The first file was dated just 2 days after what would have been her initial diagnosis, according to the timeline Eliza had given me. I pressed play, and Eliza's voice filled the room. The prognosis gives us a narrow window, Vincent. Mother still has full mental capacity, which could complicate things if she starts reconsidering the succession plan. Vincent's smooth tones responded, "That's why the medication management is crucial. Dr. Farrell understands the importance of keeping her comfortable. Comfortable patients are compliant patients. And the estate revisions? I've prepared preliminary documents. We'll introduce them gradually, starting with the smaller properties. The full amendment transferring everything to you will come later, when the medication regimen is fully established." My blood ran cold. They had been planning this from the beginning, deliberately managing Mom's medication to manipulate her during the amendment of her will. I continued through the recordings chronologically, each one more damning than the last. Eliza and Vincent discussing which medications would keep Mom cooperative without rendering her legally incompetent. Vincent reporting that he'd taken care of the original estate attorney. Eliza instructing the new nurse on preventing me from having any private time with Mom. The most horrifying recording came from just 2 weeks before Mom's death. Her voice was weak but determined. "I know what you're doing, Eliza. The documents. I won't sign them." "Mother, you're confused. The medication sometimes causes paranoia. These are just routine updates to protect the company during your treatment." "Don't lie to me. I built this company by knowing when I'm being manipulated." "Where's Sarah? I asked for Sarah weeks ago." "Sarah's not coming, Mother. She doesn't care about any of this. Now please, just sign where indicated so you can rest." There was a sound of papers shuffling, then Mom's voice again, stronger. "Get out. Both of you. Now." Eliza's voice dropped to a threatening whisper. "Dr. Farrell can adjust your medication. Mother, do you really want to spend your final weeks in a drug-induced haze because you couldn't cooperate?" The recording ended abruptly, leaving me shaking with rage and grief. In the last folder, dated just 3 days before Mom died, I found a recording addressed directly to me. "Sarah, my starlight." Mom's voice was frail but clear. "If you're listening to this, then you've inherited my phone, and I've managed to complete at least part of my plan. I don't have much time or strength, so I'll be direct. Eliza and Vincent Mercer have been systematically manipulating my medical care to impair my judgment while they alter my will and company directives. The original will, which I signed last year, divided everything equally between you and your sister, with specific provisions for your art foundation." She paused, her breathing labored. "The evidence you need is all here. The recordings, of course, but also photos I've managed to take of the original documents stored in the secure folder. The passcode is your birthday. I've been gathering evidence for weeks, whenever I could refuse the heaviest medications without raising suspicion." Another pause, longer this time. "I know we've been estranged, and that's largely my fault. I didn't know how to connect with someone so different from me, but I've always been watching, always proud of how you stood your ground and created your own path. The art collection in my private office? All yours. I bought every piece I could find." Her voice broke slightly. "I don't have the strength to fight them directly in my condition. But you do. You have the Bennett steel in you, just expressed differently than Eliza or me. Use the evidence. Take back what's yours. And Sarah, I'm sorry for not being the mother you deserved. I love you, my starlight. The recording ended, leaving me in stunned silence. After all these years of feeling rejected and undervalued, to discover that Mom had not only been proud of me but had been secretly supporting my art career was overwhelming. I found the secure folder she'd mentioned and entered my birthday. Inside were dozens of photos of legal documents, the original will showing an equal division of assets, medical directives that had been ignored, and even emails between Vincent and Eliza discussing how to accelerate the timeline when Mom showed signs of resistance. There was also a video file dated the day before I arrived at the mansion. I pressed play with trembling fingers. Mom appeared on screen, propped up in her bed during what must have been a moment of clarity. This is Margaret Bennett, and I am recording this statement of sound mind and body, though admittedly terminal, with pancreatic cancer. She held up a newspaper showing the current date. I wish to state unequivocally that any amendments to my will or company directives dated after this recording should be considered suspect and potentially executed under duress or medication that impaired my judgment. She went on to outline her true wishes. Equal division of personal assets between Eliza and me, with company control structured through a balanced board rather than majority control by either daughter. She named her original attorney, not Vincent, Mercer, as her intended executor. I fear that by the time my daughter Sarah arrives, I may no longer have the clarity or strength to communicate this directly. This phone and its contents represent my attempt to ensure justice prevails. By the time the video ended, tears were streaming down my face. But alongside the grief was a newfound determination. Mom had trusted me with this evidence, believing I had the strength to fight back. I wouldn't let her down. The next morning, I checked out of my hotel with a clear plan forming. My first stop was the office of Patricia Winters, a formidable attorney known for her expertise in estate litigation and corporate governance. Her downtown office projected exactly the kind of gravitas needed for what I was about to propose. Let me get this straight, Patricia said, after I'd explained the situation and shown her some of the recordings. You believe your sister and your mother's attorney conspired to manipulate her medication, isolate her from you, and coerce her into signing a new will while impaired. I don't believe it, I replied, sliding Mom's phone across the desk. I can prove it. For the next 2 hours, Patricia reviewed the evidence, the recordings, the photographs of documents, Mom's video statement, and the timeline I'd constructed. Her expression grew increasingly grave. This is extraordinary, she finally said. And potentially criminal. Medication tampering, elder abuse, coercion, fraud. Ms. Bennett, you have more than enough to contest the will, but this goes beyond. Probate court, what do you recommend? A multi-pronged approach. We file to contest the will immediately, submit evidence to the State Bar Association regarding Mr. Mercer's conduct, and potentially involve law enforcement regarding the medication issues. She made rapid notes on her legal pad. But there's another avenue that might be more immediately effective. The board of directors, I guessed. Patricia smiled approvingly. Precisely. Your sister may have legal control of the company shares for the moment, but the board has fiduciary responsibilities. If they see evidence that the new CEO obtained her position through potentially criminal means, they'd have to act or risk personal liability, I finished. Corporate directors take a dim view of succession plans built on fraud. But we need to move quickly. Your sister's first official board meeting as CEO is scheduled for this Friday. Over the next 3 days, Patricia and I worked relentlessly to prepare our counterattack. Through Agnes, still sympathetic to my cause, I learned that Eliza had already moved into the mansion's master suite and was hosting daily strategy sessions with Vincent Mercer. They've already contacted museums about selling off your mother's art collection, Agnes reported during our discreet meeting at a coffee shop. And there's talk of a major announcement at Friday's board meeting about restructuring the entire executive team. Using Mom's phone contacts, I reached out to her original attorney, who confirmed he'd been suddenly and unexpectedly removed from her affairs just after her diagnosis. I'd worked with Margaret for 20 years, he told me. The dismissal came via email, which was odd since Margaret always handled sensitive matters in person. Patricia secured an emergency hearing with a probate judge for the Monday following, the board meeting. We also compiled a detailed package of evidence for each board member, to be delivered during the meeting itself for maximum impact. By Friday morning, everything was in place. I dressed carefully in a tailored black suit that communicated both respect for my mother's recent passing and serious business intent. Patricia would accompany me as my legal counsel, with all the evidence safely backed up in multiple locations. Bennett Tech's headquarters occupied a gleaming tower downtown, the giant stylized B logo visible for blocks. I'd never worked there, but I'd visited enough as a teenager to know the layout. The executive floor, where board meetings were held, occupied the top level, with its panoramic views and state-of-the-art security. Ms. Bennett? The receptionist's eyes widened slightly when I gave my name. I don't see you on today's visitor list. That's an oversight, I replied calmly. Please inform the board that Margaret Bennett's daughter is here regarding urgent estate matters. My attorney and I will wait. The confusion created by my arrival worked exactly as planned. After several minutes of hushed phone consultations, we were escorted to a small conference room adjacent to the main boardroom where the meeting was already underway. Ms. Eliza says the board is in session and cannot be interrupted, the flustered executive assistant informed us. She suggests scheduling a proper appointment for next week. That won't be necessary, Patricia responded, handing over an envelope. Please deliver this to the board chair immediately. It contains time-sensitive legal information affecting the company's governance. Left alone in the conference room, we listened to the muffled sounds of the meeting next door. Through the glass wall, I could see the back of Eliza's head as she stood at the front of the room, gesturing confidently at a presentation slide showing Bennett Tech's projected growth. Under her leadership, the assistant returned, clearly uncomfortable. The board chair has called a 15-minute recess to review the documents. Ms. Eliza would like to speak with you privately before the board reconvenes. We'll speak with Ms. Eliza in the presence of the board, Patricia countered. The matters at hand concern all parties equally. When we were finally ushered into the boardroom, the atmosphere was tense. 12 board members sat around the massive table, their expressions ranging from confused to concerned. Eliza stood at the head of the table, her perfect composure showing the first cracks I'd ever witnessed. Sarah, she began, her voice artificially pleasant. This is hardly the appropriate venue for family matters. The board has important business to conduct. This is exactly the appropriate venue, I replied, nodding to Patricia, who distributed additional folders to each board member. Since the business at hand involves fraudulently obtained control of Bennett Tech. Vincent Mercer, seated beside Eliza, leaned forward. These are serious and unfounded allegations that Ms. Sarah Bennett is raising due to understandable emotional distress following her mother's passing. They're neither serious nor unfounded, I corrected, pulling out Mom's phone. And I believe Margaret Bennett herself should address the board. I played the video of Mom's statement, the room falling completely silent as her frail but determined voice filled the space. The board member's expressions shifted from skepticism to shock as she detailed the manipulation of her care and the fraudulent amendment of her will. That video could have been created at any time, Eliza interjected. When it finished, it proves nothing except that our mother was confused during her illness. The newspaper with the date might suggest otherwise, Patricia noted. But perhaps the board would be interested in hearing some additional recordings. I played selected excerpts from the most damning audio files. Eliza and Vincent discussing medication adjustments to ensure Mom's compliance. Their panic when she had moments of clarity. The explicit threats when she resisted signing documents. With each recording, Eliza's face grew paler. Vincent Mercer began scribbling urgent notes, occasionally shaking his head as if to discredit what everyone could clearly hear. The medical decisions were made for my mother's comfort, Eliza finally said, her voice less steady than before. Any suggestion otherwise is a gross mischaracterization. Is this a mischaracterization too? I queried, playing the recording, where she explicitly threatened Mom with increased sedation if she didn't cooperate. The board chair, an older man who had worked with Mom for decades, removed his glasses slowly. Ms. Bennett, Mr. Mercer, these recordings, if authenticated, suggest serious ethical and potentially legal violations. They're obviously edited, Vincent attempted, but the confidence had drained from his voice. The full recordings are included in your packets, Patricia informed the board, along with statements from Margaret Bennett's original physician questioning the medication protocols implemented after Mr. Mercer brought in a new medical team. The next hour unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony, with Patricia and I presenting evidence while Eliza and Vincent's rebuttals grew increasingly desperate. The turning point came when one of the board members, who happened to be a retired judge, asked Vincent directly about his knowledge of certain medication adjustments. Vincent stumbled through a non-answer, then abruptly changed tactics. Whatever procedural irregularities may have occurred were at Eliza's direction. As counsel, I merely executed the legal documentation requested by my client. The betrayal was so sudden that Eliza actually gasped. You were the one who suggested the medication changes. You said it was standard practice in estate transitions. Their united front collapsed completely after that, with each attempting to minimize their own role while implicating the other. The board chair finally interrupted the spectacle. I believe we've heard enough. The board will need to convene in private to discuss these matters. He turned to me with newfound respect. Ms. Bennett, your mother built this company on integrity, whatever her other complicated legacies might be. The board will not ignore evidence of fraud in her succession planning. As we prepared to leave, Eliza made one last attempt. Sarah, this vendetta won't bring Mother back. Take a settlement and drop this. You never wanted any part of Bennett Tech anyway. This isn't about the company, Eliza. It's about justice for Mom, and honoring her actual wishes. I turned to address the board. My mother built something remarkable here. Whatever you decide, that legacy deserves better than a foundation built on fraud. By evening, the news had broken across business channels. Eliza Bennett had been suspended from her role as CEO pending a full investigation. The Bennett Tech Board had voted unanimously to contest the recent will and restore governance according to prior corporate directives until legal matters were resolved. As Patricia and I watched the coverage from her office, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Ms. Bennett? This is Detective Marshall with the Financial Crimes Division. We've received some concerning information regarding your mother's estate and medical care. Would you be available to make a statement tomorrow morning? The wheels of justice had begun to turn. The 6 months following that dramatic board meeting unfolded in ways I never could have imagined. The legal proceedings were intense, but ultimately decisive. The probate court invalidated the fraudulent will, reverting to Mom's original estate plan that divided assets equally between Eliza and me. The medical board revoked Dr. Farrell's license for his role in the medication manipulation. Most significantly, both Eliza and Vincent faced criminal charges for elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Vincent, true to character, accepted a plea deal in exchange for testimony against Eliza. My sister, facing overwhelming evidence and abandoned by her co-conspirator, ultimately pleaded guilty to lesser charges. The court sentenced her to 5 years, though she would likely serve less in the minimum security facility designated for white-collar criminals. I visited her once before sentencing, not for reconciliation but for understanding. Why, Eliza? Mom was already giving you the company leadership. Why risk everything for total control? She studied me through the visitor's room window, her designer clothing replaced by standard-issue beige. You never understood our world, Sarah. In business, partial control is no control at all. I needed absolute authority to implement my vision for Bennett Tech. And that was worth betraying our dying mother? Something flickered across her face, perhaps the closest thing to regret she was capable of feeling. I told myself I was doing what she would have done in my position. She built an empire through ruthless decisions. That's where you're wrong, I replied. Mom built through determination and innovation, not fraud and betrayal. There's a difference. As I stood to leave, she called after me. What will you do with your half? Donate it all to starving artists? Mother would hate that. I paused at, the door. Actually, I think she'd finally understand it. The question of what to do with my unexpected inheritance, approximately $350 million, required deep reflection. I had never wanted or expected such wealth, and my immediate instinct was to give it all away. But as I spent time going through Mom's private papers and truly getting to know her through the records she'd left behind, I realized there was a more meaningful approach. In the end, I established the Margaret Bennett Arts Foundation, endowed with half of my inheritance. The foundation focused on integrating arts education into underserved schools and providing grants to working artists struggling to sustain their careers. The first major initiative funded art programs in the same school district where I'd been teaching. For the Bennett Tech shares I now controlled, I took a different approach. Rather than selling them or trying to run a business I had no interest in, I created a unique voting trust. The shares would remain intact, but voting rights would be exercised by a committee that included business experts and educators who understood both corporate governance and the value of creative thinking. This structure preserved Mom's business legacy while infusing it with the values I believed in. The mansion presented another challenge. After much consideration, I decided to convert the East Wing into the Margaret Bennett Gallery, featuring both established artists and emerging talents. Mom's private art collection, including dozens of my own pieces she'd secretly purchased over the years, formed the foundation of the permanent exhibition. On opening night, I stood in what had once been the formal dining room, now transformed into a light-filled gallery space. Visitors moved throughout the mansion, admiring artwork where once only business discussions had been permitted. In a special alcove, I'd created a small memorial to Mom, featuring not her business achievements, but personal items that few had ever seen. Her collection of adventure novels, the watercolor set she'd used as a young woman, photos of her laughing with Dad before his death. Agnes, now retired but honored as the gallery's special advisor, stood beside me. Your mother would be proud, Miss Sarah. This brings life to a house that was always too concerned with success to remember about living. I hope so, I replied. I'm trying to honor both sides of her, the businesswoman and the person she rarely let anyone see. In the months that followed, I gradually returned to teaching, though now just one class per semester, allowing time to guide the foundation and gallery. The joy of working directly with students remained irreplaceable, a connection to reality that wealth could easily obscure. One afternoon, while helping a struggling student with a particularly challenging painting technique, I received an unexpected visitor in my classroom. The Bennett Tech board chair, now retired himself, had come to see the arts program the foundation had established. Remarkable transformation, he noted, observing the well-equipped studio. You know, your mother once told me her biggest regret was not understanding your world better. She said business made sense to her in ways people sometimes didn't. I wish we'd had more time to bridge that gap, I admitted. She found her way, in the end, he replied. Leaving you that phone instead of sending the evidence directly to authorities or the board. She trusted your judgment, your way of handling things. That trust represented something I'd sought my entire life without realizing it. Mom's acceptance of me on my own terms. The legacy of those difficult weeks continued to unfold in unexpected ways. Former Bennett Tech employees reached out with stories about Mom that humanized the intimidating figure I'd grown up with. Her former assistant sent me a folder of doodles Mom had absently created during conference calls, surprisingly artistic for someone who claimed to have no creative talent. As the one-year anniversary of Mom's death approached, I received a letter from Eliza, her first communication since her sentencing. I still believe I was the rightful heir to Mother's business legacy, she wrote. But I recognize now that there were lines I should not have crossed. What's done is done. When I'm released, I intend to build something new, something entirely my own. Perhaps there's a lesson in that approach that I should have learned from you years ago. Not an apology, But from Eliza, this represented significant growth. I wrote back a simple note. There's dignity in creating rather than taking. Good luck with your new beginning. On the anniversary itself, I visited Mom's grave alone, bringing not flowers, but a small framed sketch I'd made of her during one of my early visits after her diagnosis, capturing a rare moment when pain medication had eased her suffering without clouding her mind. I think I understand you better now, I said to the simple headstone, my choice rather than the elaborate monument Eliza had initially planned. We were more alike than either of us realized, just expressed differently. You fought for what you believed in. So did I. It just took us too long to see the value in each other's battles. The phone that had changed everything now sat in a small display case in my home office, a reminder that sometimes the smallest inheritance carries the greatest value. Not the monetary worth of what was recovered, but the final connection with Mom, her trust in me, and the truth it revealed. As I left the cemetery, I noticed a young woman sketching under a nearby tree. Her intense concentration reminded me powerfully of myself at that age, when art was my only true language. On impulse, I walked over and asked about her work. It's for my application to art school, she explained nervously. But my parents think it's impractical, I smiled, remembering that particular struggle all too well. Let me tell you a story about a mother and daughter who took too long to understand each other's worlds, I began, and how finding that understanding, even at the last moment, changed everything. Some bridges can be built even after we think it's too late. That was perhaps Mom's final and most important lesson to me, delivered through a simple phone and the courage to record the truth, even when she was at her weakest. True wealth isn't measured in millions or control of companies. It's found in authenticity, in creating rather than taking, and in the courage to stand up for what's right, even when standing alone. Mom understood that finally, at the end. And thanks to her, so did I. Have you ever discovered unexpected meaning in what seemed like a small gesture or gift? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey of betrayal, justice, and healing resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories of family complexities and personal growth. And don't forget to share with someone who might need a reminder that sometimes the smallest inheritances carry the most profound value. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. And remember that it's never too late to bridge understanding with those we love.